and thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. And today I have a very, very special guest for all the listeners out there. Today's guest, Simon Halpin, who has quite a few athletic achievements to his name. He is an ultra runner. He's a finisher of the Marathon des Sables. He's a Guinness World Record holder for the fastest marathon on J stilts. He's completed the Artic Ultra, completed Ironman, I believe. Been a very, very busy individual, really pushing himself to the limits and beyond. Now, as always with this podcast, we'll be talking about sports. We'll be talking about, obviously, Simon's achievements, but we'll be going a little bit deeper into mindset, into different techniques that you can use to achieve your dreams in any area of life, the mindset it takes to reach such a high level in some of the most grueling sports on earth. So, Simon, thank you so much for making the time for this today, mate. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for that extremely kind interview, making me sound better than I am, but I'll take it.
Well, absolutely. You've done some amazing things, and I know you're very humble, but at the same time, today it's about giving you the credit that you deserve as well, as well as educating and inspiring our listeners as well. So, absolute pleasure to have you here today. Now, I don't always go back to the beginning with my guests, but in this case, I think we will. I think we'll go back in time a little bit and talk about where your interest in sports in general actually started, whether that started with running, whether that started with something else. Has sports always been a part of your life growing up, or is it something that came along sort of a little bit later?
Well, I suppose as a child, I was a late enough starter in sports. I didn't kind of get into to soccer like football until I was about maybe 10 years of age. So I was soccer mad and swimming mad when I was younger. Um, every day coming home from school, I was straight out into the green until it got dark in the evening. So I spent most of my childhood on the green across the road from my family home just playing football. Um, that kind of I played for teams up until my kind of late 20s until I was approaching the 30 mark. And then it was kind of getting to the stage where the interest was kind of fizzing out with people I was playing with. So trying to get teams to play a match on a weekend, you'd be knocking on people's doors that had been out drinking the night before and trying to just get enough to field the team. So that kind of went it took its own course. Kind of it came to an end. So after that, when I was 30, I kind of took up running, and that kind of led to me to where I am today.
Very well, cool. That's the background. So that sort of sets the stage a little bit for us. Thank you. And in terms of obviously, when you took up running again that time later, what was the reason for that? What sort of lit your fire to say, okay, I want to start doing some sports again and get back into that?
Well, over my background, I work in the police in Ireland, and my background had me years ago working at the Dublin Marathon, seeing the crowds going past, and kind of sparked a slight interest in it when I was in my kind of early 20s, just kind of watching it. And I said I always wanted to do it. So I signed up to my first marathon in 2013, and I didn't sign up for the half marathon, the 10K, nothing like that. I just said, I'll just go for the top, I'll go for the marathon. Um, and I finished it in, I think it was 4.5 hours or something along those lines. And after kind of finishing I kind of said I wouldn't do another one. I sat down in the pub after, and it took a couple of my friends to lift me off the seat when my legs kind of seized up. I found it extremely tough, extremely challenging, but a few days after finishing it, it was kind of a sense of achievement I had. Now, I didn't do it the following year. I didn't do anything else for till 2015. Um, I don't know why I skipped 2014, but in 2015, I kind of just said, Jesus, I might sign up and do another marathon. So I started doing a couple of different marathons around Dublin, and my interest kind of just exploded from there. And I've done over 50 marathons now at this stage, but yeah, that's where my interest kind of started from.
Wow, that's amazing. That is an amazing story. And you know what I like about that as well is it sort of shows people in a sort of abstract kind of way that whatever age you are, it's not too late to start these things. You can build up from there, you can achieve your dreams. Now we'll come into some of the marathons as well, but you mentioned so you're a police officer, is that what you do?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I do for a living. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, but very cool. Okay. Well, so moving into some of the marathons, I mean, obviously we'll come to the ultra running and we'll come to a couple of other things, but one of the things we were talking about before we started recording was actually about time management and the fact that you obviously fit in your training around family, around work, around a lot of different things, and training to the level that obviously you're training at now, that must be quite quite a trick to fit it all in. Can you share with us a little bit about how you do that? Basically, I can see you in your home gym there. So just a little bit about your routine at the moment would be great, you know?
So I have four children. When I started this, obviously I didn't have I had one child. One child still takes up your time, and I'm working shift work as well. It's not always ideal for training on the body. And so my training is usually done in the evening time when my kids are in bed, especially if you're training for an ultra marathon, your runs could be an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And to fit them in, it's not feasible to go out, especially in the wintertime when it's dark out, and to find somewhere running around Dublin City here for 2 hours. So I have a treadmill here beside me. I have a TV in front of it. I'll watch a Netflix movie. That'll pass my time in the evening running. Or for the last couple of years, I've done college. So to fit that in, I've done my lectures while training in the gym I'm in at the moment. And I switched the camera off and Zoom, and no one's any the wiser. I switch it back on, sit down in the chair, I have to answer any questions, and then stand back up and go back training again. So, in terms of time management, it's worked. It's worked very very well to my advantage over the last few years, and I've managed to achieve any of the training goals I've set and finish college and still have my family time at home as well and fit in a full time career. So it's worked.
Wow. I mean, that is quite an achievement in itself, to be honest with you, Simon, to fit everything together. And also, like I was saying before, I love that little tip, that sort of trick that you use to keep learning while you're working. Because, like I was saying before we started recording just now, there's a lot of dead time in the day, you know, when obviously when you're out running, but when, you know, people are driving, when people, you know, before right before they go to bed, there's a little bit of dead time. There's a lot of times in the day you can use but you can still be listening to something, you can still be working your mind, even if your body's doing something else. And it's I like that. I do the same thing as I mentioned, but it's a very, very powerful sort of technique because your mind will be soaking this stuff up like a sponge. So that's not a question. I'm just saying it's very, very cool. So
No. You're right. Even like most people do when their kids go to bed in the evening, they'll sit down with their husband, wife, partner, whatever, on their own. They'll sit and they'll watch Netflix. And I mean, you can you can easily do it while training. It's not that expensive nowadays to kit out a room in your house as a gym, or even just buy a simple exercise bike and use your time a bit more wisely in the evenings.
yeah. And I'd imagine having the gym in your home as well makes it more efficient, doesn't it? It makes it more efficient. You can just nip down and get the sessions in instead of having to sort of travel far to the gym. Is that right?
Yeah, well, people were asking me was I putting the gym in the garden as kind of like a financial thing to save money. It wasn't a financial thing. I'm not someone who's into material things. I don't spend money on fancy clothes or so. This is kind of what I spent my spare cash on. And it saves you the time traveling to the gym. You're not relying on gym opening hours. As I said, working shift work, you might want to go to the gym at 10 o'clock in the evening. It's not always feasible to find a gym that's open. There's very few of them around that's open that late. Um, and then just something as simple as when you've got young kids, if they're going for a nap, you can nip out for an hour, and I can still see them from where I am at the moment. So it just works.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I like that because whatever people are doing in their lives, whether it's running or whether it's something else, they can use these type of lessons of taking the holistic approach, you know, to life basically and pulling the pieces together. It's a very, very valuable life lesson. So, and as you know, Simon, that's a big part of why I do these, you know, is to sort of share the tips and the techniques and various things people can use to chase whatever dream it is that they're going after, you know, using that term. So let's jump into it with the marathons a little bit as well. Over 50 marathons, you said. Now, obviously, we'll come to certain ones in terms of ultras, in terms of the Marathon des Sables and the Ice Ultra. We'll come to all that. But in terms of like regular distance or the different distances you run, do you have certain favorite ones? Because obviously, with there being 50, I'd love to talk about all of them, but I think we'd be here until next week or whatever. So the way to sort of narrow it down a little bit, do you have certain ones that are the most special to you personally, in terms of that achievement?
Yes, so every year I do the Dublin Marathon, and I have four young boys. My boys are into like every other young kid around superheroes, etc., etc. And so every year I do the Dublin Marathon dressed up. Now I don't do it for a time. I do it just to run around and just high five children on the way around, just to give them something to look at, and just for the kids really. I do it. So Dublin Marathon is kind of my favorite one to do. Like I've done it over the years. I've done it one year. I did it in a morph suit dressed as Spider-Man. I've done it dressed as Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy wearing a pair of stilts. I've done it dressed up as a character from Star Wars with a metal helmet on me. And each one has its own kind of challenges and different levels of difficulty. But yeah, kids have always loved seeing us dressed up in this. I do it with a friend of mine running around, so they've always seemed to like seeing us running around. So Dublin's by far my favorite.
Absolutely, yeah, I can understand. That makes sense. That's a wonderful thing to be doing, giving the kids that sort of upliftment and that sort of positivity. I love that. I absolutely love that, and that how you inspire them. Thinking about it as you say in that, Simon, when you run a marathon in that type of gear, do you have to adapt your sort of process for the run in terms of the weight, the breathing, different things that might come into that?
Um, each one's been challenging. I mean, the year I did it in Spider-Man morph suit, my eyes were covered by the eye part of the suit were white, and so it was fine to see out of. My vision was obstructed, but when the sun shone in my direction, I got blinded. It was very difficult to see, so that was a bit difficult. Um, the year I did it on stilts, it was like lunging for 42 kilometers because the stilts were springy stilts, and people think they'd help you run. They don't. It's that you're lunging. You're actually lunging for 42 kilometers. Um, so that was tough because the costume I had on me doing that was quite heavy. So the heat as well kind of got to me a lot in that. And I lost a good bit of weight doing that one. And then the year I did it in the Star Wars suit, I actually tore my calf a couple of weeks beforehand. So I had committed to doing it with my friend, and my kids. My kids always dress up in whatever costume I'm wearing, and I always meet them halfway around the route. So I have the usual family picture every year. So I wanted to get that done. So I decided to run the marathon anyway. And 10 kilometers into it, my calf went again. So that year, the suit didn't bother me whatsoever. It was just a pain in my calf. So that kind of was a nice little distraction running around. But yeah, every year has its different difficulties. And I'll be doing it again this year. And I think we're about 10 weeks away. I haven't decided what we're dressing up as yet. My son usually picks what we're dressing up as. So God knows what I'll be doing this year, but we'll see in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, good luck for that one. I'm sure it'll go great, and I'm sure you'll have an amazing outfit again. But as I've said, it's a wonderful thing for the kids. People need that type of thing in the world today. Um, so when it comes to moving from those sorts of distance marathons into the ultra side of things, now before we get into that specifically, I'd like to talk about your inspiration because obviously at some point you must have felt a desire to say, okay. I want to push this beyond the regular distance marathons, which are a feat in themselves. They're absolutely a feat in themselves. Anyone who does that, absolutely massive respect. But ultras is obviously the level beyond that. So when it comes to your inspiration for doing that, what first gave you the idea to move into the ultra side of things?
Um, I think the first one I ever did was I did 100K in a day over in the UK. I saw it advertised, and I can't actually recall why I saw it online. I remember seeing it online and going, I've hit the marathon distance quite a few times now, and I didn't know what ultra marathons were. I just saw this 100K in a day, um, and I talked my friend into doing it with me. I said, we'll sign up to this and we'll see how it goes. And when I finished that, that was like a different animal finishing it. I mean, usually you're tired after doing the marathon distance. This, I don't know if it was because it was in your mind. You didn't really kind of feel tired till you kind of hit the 50, 60 kilometers mark. It's all mental, I suppose. it was just a different, it was a just a different ball game altogether. When I finished that, I kind of started looking online, kind of what's next, the next jump. And from then on, I suppose I've always had, when I do one event, I always have to have the next event planned. Like even I'm only back from Kyrgyzstan a few weeks, and even I'm already planning what I'm doing next year. I always have to have something in the back of my mind. Usually it has to be something bigger and better or something a little bit more obscure. But yeah, that was kind of what started the 100K. After that, I saw a video for kind of Ironman competitions. They have this kind of 2 minute clip of anything is possible, and that kind of wrote me into doing an Ironman. Now I'd never done a triathlon. I kind of I jumped into that a little bit too blind. Probably well, it was a bad mistake. I did learn there was a kind of a steep learning curve of what not to do when you're training for a triathlon. Um, but I did the Ironman in 2017. And after I finished that, I thought that was kind of the pinnacle of a sports event. I could kind of take on the world after that. So I signed up to do the Marathon des Sables, which was at the time known as the toughest race on earth. After doing it, I wouldn't call it the toughest race on earth. It was very, very tough, but there are tougher things out there. But that's where my interest kind of went along.
Absolutely amazing. I love it, the concept of pushing yourself further and sort of seeing what the limits are, and then when you reach that, then there's obviously something beyond that again and again, and it's an amazing process that to touch on. So we'll come back to that, but yeah, marathon describes it is described. I have heard it described as the toughest race. I mean, it's interesting to get your take on that, but let's talk about a few things with that race. First of all, obviously running in the desert like that, there's got to be a lot taken into account in terms of things like hydration and how you prepare for it. So I'd like to talk about basically about that experience. I've interviewed a few people who've done that race, and there's some of the things they'd say about the hydration and about the sort of the prep work you have to do, obviously running on sand and things. It's a crazy experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like in your own words? Because other runners will know about this, but for people who don't do what you do, it's like another world to them. Do you know what I mean? It's like something that's really far out for people's imaginations. So first of all, what was it like in terms of the climate? Obviously hot, but things that people may not know about running in the desert,
Well, the biggest thing people always think when you tell them you're running in the desert is they picture, if you can imagine in your head, the Lawrence Arabia sand, the like beautiful sand dunes going up and down, the kind of the waves in the sand dunes, soft sand. The desert's not like that. A very, very small part of it is very, very tiny percentage. Most of it's what they call pre-desert. So it's rock hard sand with rocks. It's like a rocky beach. And so running on it, you will get bruised feet. It will hurt you. And that was the biggest thing people didn't realize when you tell them you're going running in a desert. That's the first thing they picture is the sand dunes. And the heat, there's no escaping the heat. You're out under the sun. There's no shade. You've no trees. You're just exposed for the whole time you're there. I mean, I had most people wear long sleeve tops to cover their skin to kind of save themselves. And now the heat before I went out, I acclimatized by I spent 2 hours a day in a sauna, sitting reading books. Now the glue on the books were melting, if you can imagine. Um, so my books were getting destroyed in the sauna. I actually watched movies. I put my iPod at the time on the back of the door, and I was watching films to try and kill the time in the sauna. But the heat, I didn't feel the heat too badly. And now I'm Irish. I have an Irish complexion. I'm not built to be under the sun. But the heat does get you. But I was acclimatized for the heat. And one of the hardest things about running in the desert is you're hungry. You're hungry all the time. You're burning so many calories. You've got a minimum amount of food with you that's all in powder form. Day one or day two, eating the food isn't too bad. And after that, you're just sick of it. I mean, the third day, I think it was the third day, if memory serves me correctly, coming in. And in the morning time, I tried to drink my porridge, and my porridge was in powdered form. You put the water on top of it. I drank it down. I actually got sick back in my own hand and my bottle. I had to wipe sick off the top of the bottle and still drink it because that was my calories for the day, and it would have absolutely put me out of the race if I couldn't get the calories into me. And they give you water over there. You're limited to a number of water bottles. So what they do is that they'll get a water bottle, they'll mark on the top, they'll write your initials on the top of it, so they know what your allocation of water they've given you is. And so you're drinking warm water, you're eating powder food, you're sleeping on you're sleeping on rocks basically. And the desert, people think, oh, you'd be lovely and warm at night. Desert freezes at night. It's freezing cold. So you're out for like a marathon in Ireland would take me less than 4 hours. Over there, a marathon distance would take you 10 hours, maybe 8 hours. And they do a long stage day as well. That actually took me 24 hours and 10 minutes, I think it was, to run it. You're running through the night, through the dark. So it's very inhospitable of a place to be running, but it's beautiful at the same time. It's like nowhere else on earth. And as well as that, it's not entirely flat. There's sand jebels, sand mountains. So when you're going up them, you've one foot in the sand. So every kind of step you're taking up, you're sinking half a step back. So your energy is just getting pulled from you. And you've no comforts, you've no electronics, which is kind of a good thing in one way. You're kind of disconnected from the world, and you wake up in the morning, you have your distance to do that day, and that's what you have to do. But it is brilliant. It's brutal. It's brilliant. Um, but a lot of people do suffer. A lot of people fall. They'll fall on blisters. There's been a couple of deaths in it over the years. And the thing that sucked me into doing that one was I saw there was a documentary on Netflix. It was a police officer done it years and years ago. He got lost and ended up finding a little grotto to go into. He broke bats open and ate inside the bats and drank their blood, trying to stay hydrated. So he ended up getting picked up by crossing over the border into the next country, and they thought he was a spy until they could rehydrate him, and then they realized that he's just a runner who got lost. So it is a dangerous place to be. There's no kind of question about that, but it is beautiful, and it was a tough challenge. And to me, it was my kind of Everest to do. Now, since completing it, I've done harder things since it, but at the time, I spent 2 years training for it. It was the be all and end all for me to finish that. And finishing, it's not like when you finish a race over anywhere else. You're not running with crowds, right? That you finish on your own. There's no one cheering you on or anything like that. It's your own personal kind of thing to finish it. But yeah, it was brilliant. I'd recommend anyone who wanted to do it. It's expensive now, but it's well worth it.
Wow, absolutely incredible. I mean, what an experience to have. It's something a lot of people would never get to experience, their whole life through. You said about training for 2 years for that. I mean, it's a simple one here, but when you do reach the finish line and when you have actually hit that goal, and I hear you about, enjoying the experience and the process, even with the brutality, but when you obviously did finish it, what actually goes through your mind in a moment like that? Is it something you can put into words?
Yeah, well, you have your ups and downs. I know when I finished that, I do recall of a very long text message I wrote home, and in that message, it says that I actually felt a bit of an anticlimax when I finished. I kind of went, was that it? And it did take a second to kind of go, oh wow, what have I just achieved? Kind of. And I mean, people to this day, that was when was that 2018 I done that, and to this day, people still do nothing but ask me about that one race because they've seen the James Cracknell documentary, and it's the one that's kind of well known. And so yeah, I do get asked about it the whole time, and you can probably see the picture of me in the desert over the back of my head. I have a picture up on top of one of the sand dunes I took. And so yeah, it is brilliant. You do get a good sense of achievement of it. People do say the toughest race on earth. As I said, it's not the toughest race on earth. There has been a lot of races kind of since that are tougher, but at the time there was nothing bigger in the world to me. So finishing that, I mean, I couldn't stop smiling after I finished it. Coming home, especially, I just thought I was king of the world after finishing that.
Well, that's a fair way to feel, 100%, because it is an absolutely incredible achievement. I mean, it's amazing. What was the reaction like from, well, say your family or your good mates or the people sort of who would have been following your progress when they found out, however it was that they found out that you finished the race? What was the sort of reaction like from everybody, basically?
See, because we were disconnected, nobody was. They were able to follow me on GPS, but they didn't know exactly how I was getting on. And so, as I said, I sent them when I got back to civilization. When I say civilization, small towns in Morocco isn't really civil, but we had reception. And I sent it. The message I sent home has on it. On day two, I felt like pulling out because I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. Now I was physically fit, very, very fit going into that. So they didn't really understand what I was going through until I sent that message. So they could see day one, I loved it. Day two, I felt like pulling out. Like I did collapse into my tent in the evening on day two. I was just gone. I was exhausted. And then on the last day, I actually took off running with the pros at the start when they. So to put it in context, we all start at, I can't remember the time, but maybe 8 a.m. in the morning, and the pros get to start 2 hours later. So they will pass you at some point. So when the pros passed, I took off running with them because I felt so good. So I stayed running with them for a while, just kind of experience what they were experiencing. And I felt great coming towards the end of that. So, but I did have a very dark day two. But to answer your question, my family didn't know what I was going through till they got that message off me. So, um, when I got home, yeah, I kind of, I suppose there was a sense of pride, and that I finished it amongst my family, especially when I got home. And it was good. It was good for my kids. I mean, it's probably the main reason I do these things for my kids to kind of see like, oh well, dad done that, and it was kind of to see hopefully they'll take on something like that when they're older.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the inspiration side of things and showing people what's possible and everything like that in life is it's a beautiful message that you sort of give out by doing what you do. You know what you do sort of represents that. So that is incredible. And in terms of the recovery as well, so the last thing about the Marathon des Sables, and we'll move on to a few others. But in terms of the recovery, how long does it take you to sort of feel normal or feel good again after that level of endurance and everything?
Um, that one when I came home, I had a good few days where now because you're on powdered food, I didn't bring anything solid with me. It was just powdered food the whole time because I was cutting straps off my bag and everything to make it lighter. And I felt bad for probably a week after it probably would have been, and eating all around me and just exhausted the whole time. But I had the time off work to recover. But it did take a good week to kind of feel normal again and kind of get back into my normal eating habits. And but yeah, no, they do take their toll, and you do lose a good bit of weight doing these things now.
Absolutely, yeah. I can imagine it does take a little while to bounce back, but an incredible achievement. I know it's something people ask you about a lot, but it's an incredible achievement. So what I was gonna do now, even if we're slightly out of time with this, I think it'll be interesting to flip this on its head. What I mean by that is out of linear time, because with the Ice Ultra or the Arctic Ultra, you know, that you did, obviously, I'm gonna follow on with this one next because it flips the extreme environment of the desert, obviously, right on its head with the other end of the spectrum with the extreme cold. So I'm going to touch on that one in a similar vein. Now, for anybody who doesn't know about this one, share with us, please, the same story as you did with Marathon des Sables, how you found it, what inspired you to do the Arctic one. Was that from seeing like a documentary or the same type of thing, or was it from something else?
No, so the I met an Irish guy over in Martin Sala, and he had sent me a text message and said, "Have you seen this article? Would you do it with me?" And I went, "Okay." I hadn't seen it, so I saw there was a company called Beyond the Ultimate, and so for context, the Martin Sala will have about 900 competitors away with it. The company Beyond the Ultimate, they only bring about 40 max for most of these events. I think actually it was a lot less the year I done the Ice Ultra, but it's a more kind of intimate group, so you kind of get to know everyone better. And so he asked me to do the ice ultra with him. So that's 230 kilometers over 5 days up in the Arctic Circle. And that, as I mentioned, I don't, the Marathon des Sables is not as tough as racing there. I found the ice tougher. And the cold is a different animal altogether. You have to watch how fast you move. When you move too fast, you sweat too much, it'll freeze or get hypothermia. You move too cold, you're not warm enough, you'll freeze or get hypothermia. So the Arctic is a lot more dangerous in other ways in terms of maybe getting frostbite on your toes or making sure your kit's right and nothing's exposed. I mean, you lose a glove for even a couple of minutes. There's people who've got frostbite in their fingers up there for things like that happening. And even something as simple as you need to go for a wee. I mean, there's certain things you don't want exposed out in the cold for any long length of periods of time for risk of losing them. So you have to be so careful when you're in the cold like that. But yeah, the ice, I found the ice tougher than I found the desert. Now, I probably trained for the desert better than I trained for the ice. But yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's an understatement. I mean, as you say, I interviewed a guy probably about a month ago now called John Shield who did the Ice Ultra, and he was describing some of the temperatures with minus. I can't remember what it was. It was something silly, like the freezing temperatures and things like that. And he described, breaking ice off his shoes and all sorts of things. And I was listening to this stuff, and I was like, bloody hell, this is next level. But can you describe the landscape? I mean, like you described with the desert, where you said it's not what people think. It's sort of solid sand and rocks. And I was listening to that same type of thing. I think that people who've never been somewhere like that. Um, Even personally, I've been in deserts, but I haven't been anywhere as frozen as say as that environment. So can you describe the misconceptions, if you like, that people might have if they haven't been there, if you get what I mean with this, you know?
Yeah, so it would be we're running on frozen lakes. Now you're not going to it's frozen lakes and kind of mountains. And it's not it's the lakes you're not going to fall through like the colder it is the better because the ice is harder on the lakes. If it heats up like the fifth day in the ice, I think it did heat up slightly, so the top layer was kind of a little bit more melted. And you're not going to fall through, but you get wetter, which is worse because it's colder. And the landscape, it's just when it's clear, you can see for absolute miles. It's beautiful. It's just white snow. You can imagine kind of a wintry scene of deep compacted snow. That's kind of the way it is. And you do have your pine trees, etc., up there, but they're covered in snow. It's very, very picturesque. When it gets dark, the sky is completely clear. Stars are beautiful above your heads, but it's just an expanse, just vast, vast expanse of just snow. You can see for miles and miles until when the weather turns in the ice. The weather turns in the ice. I mean, the guy I done it with was only 5, 10 meters ahead of me running when we got caught in the blizzard. Now the blizzard, I think, if memory serves me correctly, with the wind chill it was close to -40. It was -38, I think. But I couldn't see him until he turned around and looked back towards me with his headlamp. I couldn't see him that close to me. It's dangerous when the kind of storms hit. It'll turn quite quickly, but when it's calm, it's very calm. It's very quiet. It's very kind of, as I said, very vast. You can see for miles and miles and miles, and you can hear a pin drop in the woods near you. But when the wind picks up, you won't hear anything. It's the howling of the wind. Snow doesn't fall from kind of up above your head down. It blows left to right or right to left. Snowflakes blowing across your face. Yeah, it's a different beast.
Wow, that is an incredible experience. I mean, wow. Did you have any sort of health effects from it? Because you said people had frostbite and all this type of thing, and hopefully you didn't have anything like that. Did you come out of it in one piece, basically, you know?
Yeah, so you can't acclimatize for the cold unless you own an industrial freezer, I suppose. For the heat, I could acclimatize. For the cold, I didn't know how it was going to affect me. And I was fine in the cold, absolutely fine. I mean, your gear, your equipment, it's how you plan your equipment, what you bring with you. And I had a layering kind of system, is what you're recommended. I mean, yeah, you'll have a mandatory kit list, but I had no way of testing my kit realistically till I was there. I had snowshoes to run in. So for context, when the ice is hard underfoot, you have like crampon spikes to run on. When it's not, if it's soft snow, we had snowshoes on our back. You swap them over, you're running the snowshoes. Now, snowshoes I tested on sand, and the beach 30 minutes from here was the only way I had of testing it. It's Ireland, we don't get snow. And you might get it once every couple of years, but that's about all the snow we get over here. So I didn't really have any way of testing them in Ireland. So yeah, I was jumping in kind of to the unknown with the cold, but the cold's fine. It didn't affect me. I was absolutely fine in the cold, so I was lucky.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. The same type of thing as what I was saying with the Marathon des Sables. When you finished the Ice Ultra, the Arctic Ultra, when you completed that same type of thing, what went through your mind in that moment? Again, because you pushed past your perceived limits and pushed the boundaries even further, you know?
So when I finished that one, I have to be completely honest. When I finished that one, what went through my mind was what's next. Now it's just what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next. I've a list as long as my arm of things I want to take off to do. But the ice, I wanted to finish it. Now, the guy around it got injured. He had an Achilles injury towards the end of it, so we got caught out. I stayed with him. We got caught out. We were the last ones home to finish the kind of long stage day on the ice. So we had some dark times on it. It was tough towards the end, but I went with the guy to do it, so I stayed with him, even though he was injured. He hobbled his way, so it kind of did put me out in the cold a lot longer than I wanted to be. But I loved the ice. I loved finishing it. When I crossed the finish line, I did just want to know, kind of in my head, what's next, what's next. For the few weeks after I came home, I spent a lot of time online, kind of researching what am I going to do next. I have to do something different. And obviously, then COVID kicked in not too long after, so COVID kind of put the brakes on my running career. But yeah, no, that's what went through my mind. You do have your sense of achievement you always get. I did feel great. I did feel, wow, I've done this. It's kind of another one ticked on the bucket list, but it was what's next.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, I love that mindset of how how you constantly want to do the next thing and you keep pushing on forwards. We'll take a moment to touch on the mindset actually, because we've touched on a few aspects of your training a little bit, with the home gym and with the saunas and different things you would do
Yeah.
to adapt to different races. But obviously, you have to have an iron will, you have to have a very strong mind to do what you do as well, and to keep pushing, that many miles in and all of this type of thing. So I was curious if you have like a mental process that you go through when you're preparing for the race as well as physically, if that makes sense.
When I started doing this at first, the big thing I had to prepare me mentally was for the likes of the desert. And when I was running on a treadmill for a couple of runs, I just put a picture of sand in front of me and didn't listen to music, didn't do anything to pass the time to mentally prepare myself. And I do long, long distances just to bore myself. So I know if I could do the distance wearing my kit bag on my back with a picture of the desert in front of me, that's going to be a lot harder than running when I have good scenery kind of to look around and look at when I'm kind of in the environment. And that did help. Now I've kind of flipped it a little bit now that I don't ever go over maybe half marathon distance when I'm training coming for these events because there's not a huge benefit going any further. I know I can do the distance and especially leading up to them getting kind of close to them. I don't want to injure myself or kind of exhaust myself. So I kind of do the half marathon distance is kind of the kind of distance I kind of set myself to kind of to achieve before I go. So mentally, once I kind of hit that, I have that in the back of my mind. That's what I want to achieve before I go off. And once I know I've done that, then I know I'm prepared. So before I always have to do the long distance, bore myself on a treadmill to know that I'm prepared for when I go away. Now that's flipped. I can get away with doing the shorter distances. I get away with listening to music, podcasts, watching movies here while I'm training. So mentally that's enough to prepare me now because I suppose I've built up the experience and then I can always tap into the fact that I finished these events before. So if I feel weak in the mind when I'm doing them, I always just think back, I've done these. And on the other side of it, I've had a few failures over the years. And a couple of years ago, I tried to break the world record for running around the ring road in Iceland. When I was a couple of days into it, I got about 10% of the distance the way around. I hurt my ankle, had to pull out. And that hurt coming home. I'm not talking about the pain in my ankle. That went after a few days, but my ego hurt me coming home because I wanted to finish that. So if it gets to the stage now where I'm not going to finish something, I kind of look back and go, do I want to feel like that when I come home after a few days? Now, safety does dictate a lot of these things. I mean, I'm not just thinking about my own safety, especially when I was in Iceland there, I was thinking about, I have my wife and kids to come home to. I was on my own. I couldn't risk going up into the wilderness in Iceland with a hurt ankle. If I had been in Ireland doing something, I would have just ran through the pain and just continued on. I couldn't risk something like that over there, but I do have those things to touch back into mentally if I ever need to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually, using that as using well the positives and the negatives as fuel for the next time, it makes a lot of sense. Um, that's an interesting topic in itself, to be honest with you, Simon, in terms of bouncing back from defeats, failures, whatever you want to call it. Not so much dwelling on what happened, because I don't like to dwell on these negative things, but obviously there's always going to be things that don't go according to plan. So in terms of like finding the strength to go again, I know you've touched on that, saying you use it as fuel. But how do you go again after something like that happened and not feel sort of discouraged or not feel, worried about what's going to happen or that type of thing, if you get what I mean?
Well, I consider myself, and especially when it comes to running events, I consider myself a very, very positive person, and I'll always take positives out of the negatives, no matter what. Um, I mean, as I said, I'm only back from Kyrgyzstan doing the mountain ultra, and after I finished day three, we had an issue with the fuel just getting lost. I didn't have time to recover. I only had a couple of hours, and I had an issue with my knee with swelling, so I didn't get to finish the last 2 days in that after being over there for nearly 2 weeks. Um, so that was kind of, if you want to take that into context, I should be coming home from that, kind of dwelling on that, kind of going, oh, I didn't finish that, I'm down in the dumps. I had the complete opposite. I had a great time, and that's just spurred me on to want to do more and more when I come home now. So I suppose with experience and with the amount of these I've done, I've had lots of positive moments. I've had lots of negative moments, but any negative moments that I'm having now are kind of, I've gotten to the stage where I've always taken something positive from them. I mean, even in Iceland, I planned on being in Iceland for nearly 30 days. I wasn't. I was over there for, as I said, I only did 10% of it. Coming back from that, my kind of mindset was I got to see parts of the country no one's got to see. I'm out in the wild. I got to meet great people. I mean, I had strangers helping me along the way around. And so I suppose I've learned to take the negative aspect of a lot of these runs as positivity things if I fail. And that does spur me on to keep going. I kind of, especially like the likes of when I'm just home from, I'm going to go again to do that next year. And it's made me want to go back more and more, because not only because I didn't finish, more so the fact that I had such a great time there. I met great people. It's a great country. And I want to experience the little bit extra I didn't get to experience. So I don't know if that's a roundabout way of answering your question, but that's how I take the positives out of the negatives now.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It really does. And like I said earlier, I mean, some of the things like this are really good lessons people can use for any area of life, whether they're runners or not, whether even if they're doing something else, things like that will happen. Things won't go according to plan, but it's not what happens, but how you respond to what happens that's the important thing. And it's a very, very good lesson. While we're on some of the mindset topics as well, obviously something with what you do that I think would be very interesting to touch on here is the concept of the pain barrier, because even though you're running and you're in these incredible locations and you're obviously very blessed, I must say, to do something that you love, to that level and see the world, obviously it's bound to hurt quite a lot. And I've heard these things be described of, like, hitting the wall, like the metaphorical wall, or what's the other one, the cave of pain, and this type of thing. People talk about all this type of stuff, but just in terms of your mindset, when you are feeling the tiredness and when some of these things are setting in, obviously, as I said earlier, you have an iron will. You must have a technique to push through that, because I can imagine when you're running, there's obviously high points when you feel great. So you said about Marathon des Sables, you said about catching up with the pros and experiencing what they experienced and all that type of thing. So that's the high. When there's a lag of, I think you said with that of day two, wasn't it, where you felt rough, you felt
Yeah,
tired.
yeah.
Basically, pushing through those types of moments mentally and the techniques you use to do it. Basically.
Um, I suppose each situation is kind of different. I know with the desert run, on the long stage day, so the day it took me over 24 hours to do, about 20 hours into that one, I lost movement in my left arm, and I had to keep moving and moving, and it was dark, and I actually just looked up, and I remember looking up at the stars and thinking to myself, going, I've never seen the skies. I live in Dublin City. I don't get to see clear skies. So that was that kind of switched my mind to kind of Jesus, I'm somewhere beautiful in the world. Not a lot of people get to do this. This is great. So little things like that do help in terms of the mindset to kind of keep going. And when you sign up to a lot of these races, you have your finish point in mind, and you know you're going to have dark times. You know, nothing's ever going to be, oh, this is going to be great the whole way through. You're going to have moments where your mind's just saying stop, just stop, drop out. It's the same. It's the same if you go for a 10K run, I suppose. People do get that around 7 or 8K into it. They'll have the mindset to go, oh, slow down, this is hurting. But you have your end target kind of goal in sight, and you know you're going to have your ups and downs. So you know you're going to be hit with your dark moments, and you know that there's going to be kind of brighter times through those dark moments. So you just have to know when they come, push on through, that they'll pass. So that's how I kind of, especially day two in the desert there, I knew that I was thrown up getting sick. I knew I had to get my food in me because I knew when I get moving the next day, this will pass. So you just kind of have to suck it up and get on with it and know that it's going to pass. To be better times ahead. So that's kind of well, that's how I deal with the kind of the dark moments.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. As I said earlier, having that sort of iron will, having that mental strength, whatever you want to call it, is a very important thing. And again, something people can use in potentially in their own way in other life areas. So we've talked about some of those. Guinness World Record. This needs a mention as well, and shortly we'll come to some future plans as well, because I know obviously there's a what's next mindset. So in a minute we will talk
Yeah.
about what is next. But before we do, the Guinness World Record thing, stilts and everything. Now, a lot of people will know this, people who've heard of you and everything, but for anyone who's hearing this for the first time, can you give us a little bit of context on what the Guinness World Record actually was? And again, as I keep saying, what gave you the idea for that as well, please?
So the idea for that actually came by accident. My son asked me to dress up as Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. For anyone who's not into Marvel films, he's the guy who looks like the big tall tree. So I had to be taller. So I ran with three other people dressed up as the Guardians of the Galaxy with me. I had to be taller than them. And I said, geez, I'll grab a pair of stilts. That might work. So I ordered this pair of jumping stilts online that you're meant to be able to run in. You're not. It was blatant false advertising, whoever was selling them anyway. But I did one quick run in them. I did 5K in the Phoenix Park here in Dublin in them, and they hurt. They hurt an awful lot. I mean, they were cutting into my knees, and as I said, it was like lunging around for 42 kilometers when I actually did the race. So you can imagine when I started running, or we used them at first, they were burning my legs. So I said I wasn't gonna wear them again before the marathon. I was just gonna suck it up, and once I start the marathon, I have to finish it end off. So the morning of the marathon, I looked up online, kind of just researched, and I was seeing if anyone had ever done a marathon, a pair of these stills before, and there was a world record there for I think it was 6.5 hours or just over. So I didn't mention that to any of the people I was running with. Usually when I do marathon stress up, you finish between 4 and 5 hours because you're stopping and you're messing with people on the way around and all. You're not, as I said before, you're not going for the time. So about 10 kilometers into the marathon, I mentioned to one of the lads with me, went, we might be online here for a world record if I finish. So that kind of was in the back of my mind. It wasn't what pushed me to do it in the stills. That was not why I was doing it. I was doing it for my kids. That's why I was doing it. But I said, Jesus, it might be nice to finish here and get a world record. So running around, I was about 2 kilometers from the end, and one of the bolts actually came off the stilts, and one of the guys who was with me had to run half a kilometer back. And that somehow managed to find this big metal bolt in the middle of the stilts. And I managed to finish. It was like lunging the whole way around the mountain course. Both my knees, both of them are cut underneath. And I think I absolutely destroyed my hip flexor muscles, but I finished, I broke the world record. Memory serves me correctly now. I think it was about half an hour I broke it by. Now it's been absolutely demolished by about 2 hours. Somebody obviously saw my record and decided to destroy it. They didn't do it dressed up, mind you, but they still managed to break my record. But yeah, for the brief period there, I had the Guinness World Record, so I'll always have that. So yeah, I was chuffed with that. So that kind of that's what led me over to try and break the world record nice, and now I will go back and do that. But yeah, it was nice to have, nice little achievement to the kids to go into their friends in school and tell them their dad has a world record. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something very special, very unique, and a great achievement in and of itself. So obviously we've touched on, as I always say, some of the highlights here. I always know that there's always going to be more stories. We'll talk about the future in a moment. A very brief mention to the one you just got back from Kyrgyzstan. Am I correct in you saying that you mentioned that earlier?
yeah, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just it's yeah, beautiful place, but yeah, I'm only back of I'm only back 3 weeks now. Back so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you definitely get to see the sights, you know. Um, I tell you what, let's have a quick couple of highlights from Kyrgyzstan, what that was like, and then we'll move into your future plans and everything you've got coming up from there.
But Kyrgyzstan's the first race I've ever done. I've done the Ben Nevis Ultra, which I class as altitude before doing this, but Kyrgyzstan's the first time I ever did proper altitude. So I was over for an altitude acclimatization trek for a couple of days beforehand, hiking with our race backpacks on us. And so I got to see the sights and experience what the race was going to be like. So that was pretty cool just before we started. But it was a 5 day ultra event. It was 200 kilometers and up to 4,000 meters altitude. When you're doing the race, as I said, I did 3 days out of the 5 days of that. So including the trek, I got 6 days kind of over there up at altitude, kind of running. It was great. But you're climbing the equivalent of Mount Everest in that time. You're doing the ultramarathon, and the altitude was unreal. I mean, the only way to describe it is if you think of Switzerland with the snow-peaked caps on the mountains and the glacial lakes, it's like that on steroids. There's nothing like it. It's remote. I mean, we use Russian military vehicles just to get to the start line over wooden bridges. And during the race, we were doing river crossings, and you get to see there's a lot of the nomads kind of living in the plains. They're kind of living in these kind of yurt tents, so they're probably just as curious of you as you are of them. So there's nowhere else, absolutely nowhere else like it. I mean, it hasn't been spoiled by tourism. There's no infrastructure over there, and yeah, it's just an absolute amazing place. Hence, I want to go back. I've never been anywhere like it, and I have. It's the first time I've done something where usually when I do a race, I always kind of go, "That's ticked off. What's next?" This one is I've been there. I've done it, and I want to go back and do it again. I absolutely loved it that much. It's just such an amazing place. It's a great place.
Yeah, it is. It is exceptional. I mean, I've heard this from one or two other people who've raced there as well, and the warm welcome they receive from the people and the environment, and just so many different things. A small technical point on that, and then we'll move into the future. When it comes to the sort of high altitude and like the oxygen changes and all that type of thing, how do you adapt to that? Because as seen as we've talked about all these other sort of extreme, the heat and the cold and all these different things, in terms of the altitude and acclimatizing or the effect it had on you basically and all this type of thing. What was that side of things like?
So I'm not a professional athlete, so I'm allowed to take a thing called Diamox, which is an altitude medication if worse comes to worse. So with altitude, what happens is your brain swells, and that's what in turn gives you the headaches. Your heart rate accelerates. It'll fatigue you quicker. Your breathing gets a little more kind of labored. And I did the acclimatization trek to kind of adjust the altitude. It helped absolutely immensely. And I didn't feel the altitude on the way up. What I felt is on the way down from any of the peaks were up. On the side of my head, I had a lot of pressure. So about 3 days into it, I started taking the Diamox tablets. Now, as I said, I'm not a professional. I'm allowed to take that. If you're a professional athlete, it's actually a banned substance. It's something you have to get prescribed by your doctor. So you're not allowed to take it if you're a professional. And John Shields, you had on, he actually won the race over in Kyrgyzstan I was on. And he couldn't take that because he'd be disqualified for taking it. So I'd always consider myself a mid-table runner, so I was happy enough to take it. There was no chance of me. Like, I mean, John Shields would probably finish those races about half the time I do them. So I had no problem taking it, but that's how I adjusted to the altitude. I used the acclimatization trek, and then for when I felt it after the third day, I took the Diamux. Now I took it for I took it for a day and a half, but it did help. But yeah, it's a tough one. You don't realize how bad the altitude gets you. I mean, going up the slopes or the inclines, on the rocks, you're kind of zigzagging. And one of the girls who I was with on the third day had a very good strategy. She said, "You count 50 steps. After 50 steps, she was going to count our break." So that's what we were doing. And as we're getting closer and closer to tops, those 50 steps are coming down to 30 steps, 20 steps, 10 steps, and you had to break. I mean, you're breathing, it just hurt. Your heart rate was through the roof. I mean, I was getting heart rate warnings on my Garmin, watched the whole way up, but yeah, it hurts. Altitude is a different animal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've tried a bit of everything so far, but as you said earlier, there's a long bucket list yet to go as well, is something you mentioned. Um, so I'd like to talk about that. Now, with this, obviously, with the future, it's a very cool topic because it shows your hunger for continuing to sort of improve on yourself and continuing to push the limits and all this type of thing. Now, I don't mind how far ahead in time you'd like to go. If you want to go, like years, or if you just want to go months, or I mean, it's entirely up to you, but it's just to get a feel for what's inspiring you, what's lighting your fire, and what you're aiming for from here, basically.
So I suppose in the immediate future and then next year, I will go back to Kyrgyzstan. That's my plan for going back over there next July. And I'll still do my Dublin Marathon every year, and then kind of I suppose what I kind of have next on my list. I want to go back to Iceland and run around. And now I need 30 days to do that. So that is kind of a more difficult. That will probably be the year after next year to do that. And then I want to do some sort of a race then in Patagonia. That's always one place that's on the bucket list to see down that direction. And like anyone else who does the races I do, if you actually look at a lot of people who do these kind of races at their Instagram feeds, etc., they all kind of progress onto doing the North Pole Marathon, the South Pole Marathon. Some people do the 7 marathons in 7 days and 7 continents. These things are all on my list. And my only issue is I have to save for them. It's these things are expensive. I mean, Kyrgyzstan alone this year with the equipment, flights, everything else probably cost me close to 6,000 euros. Now I don't spend money on really anything else, but still, it's a lot of money for someone kind of in my profession to save for. And I'm not sponsored to do these, so it's all out of my own pocket. But that's kind of what's on my list, kind of in the immediate future. And I suppose we'll see where we go from there. But I'm always online looking at different races. I mean, even this morning I was looking at a race over your neck of the word, the Dragons back there in Wales. That's kind of one that I'm going to want to do at some point, and it looks absolutely amazing. And I know John that you had on is doing that now in a few weeks, so I'll be following him closely doing it. But yeah, that's kind of my plans for the future.
Absolutely amazing. Well, there's a lot of these incredible achievements yet to come. And I tell you what, when you've done a few more of these, we can always hop back on and do another one of these talks and sort of update people on how it's gone, at that point. Because I don't say that very often, but there are a few people I say now and again of, yeah, we need an episode too, just because you can tell that there's going to be, even if it's like a year or something, it's a while away, you can still tell there's going to be some really, really good things yet to come. But Simon, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd like to thank you for your sort of being an open book basically and sharing a lot of what you shared here, about obviously the running achievements, but about your life and your mindset and a little bit about your family and how you inspire your kids and all of these sorts of things that you sort of opened up about, I think is absolutely amazing. And we've got the amazing stories of these achievements, but at the same time, we've got like the deeper side of it, and we've touched on these different life lessons, and it's got the motivation and everything sort of laced through, if you like. So I'm very, very happy with that, because that's what I was aiming for, fun stories and motivation, and we tick those boxes and then some. So yeah, I just want to thank you again for coming on, to be honest, mate. 100%.
Yeah, thanks very much. Been great.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.